Good morning. I'm Pete Najarian on this Wednesday morning, and an interesting start to the week that we've had. And you go back to Friday even still, and I know I'm going all the way back to Friday, but how about that volatility? We absolutely just ratcheted up. We were up there towards 21. A lot of fear in the market. Everybody worried about Bullard's comments. And wow, Monday, kind of stopped talking about it. Tuesday, completely lost it. Today, nobody seems to care at all. Take a look at what's happened to volatility. Volatility went from, call it 21, very close to 21, and here we are now trading in the 16s, the mid 16s. So we've certainly seen volatility just get absolutely crushed in just a matter of days. So that's been pulling back. The Dow was an interesting story yesterday because we began the day with some triple-digit losses, and before you know it, we started to find ourselves, started to find a little bit of that feeling and balance of the moves, and we started to see shifting of sectors that were in the negative that were moving into the positive. And before you know it, we recaptured that 34,000 level on the Dow, and we finished the day up about 70 points. The NASDAQ absolutely screaming and on fire. It was choppy early, but then the acceleration and the move to the upside, and now yesterday at least hitting all-time highs. That was pretty impressive. Really nice move, about 110 points, 111 points to the upside. As I say, hitting new highs. Something that just a couple weeks ago, a lot of people were scratching their heads. And the reality is we're starting to see some of the names start to push. And I'll get into those specific names in just a second. But the S&P also sniffing around near those all-time highs, up about 21 points. So very, very close also. And a nice move when you look at the start of the day to where we actually finished. A pretty impressive move back up to the upside, and everybody finishing in the green. So sectors, I mentioned some of the flips that we'd seen. You started off the day with energy. It was down about 1%. That flipped around and all of a sudden started lifting to the upside. Consumer discretion up about 1%. So that was something that was definitely a part of what we were seeing, NASDAQ as well as the broader markets in the S&P. But then you look over at tech, you look at the semis, and you start to see a nice move to the upside, kind of moving in concert. And that was part of the reason, and I'm going to hit in a second exactly what was really driving the NASDAQ, because it was a combination of two different elements. But before we get there, we look over at crude still holding 73 pretty nicely. And then you take a look over at Bitcoin, which had been under some incredible pressure. And that's been something that we've been watching pretty closely. And we've seen some pressure in terms of the levels coming down from that 40,000 level and actually breaching and getting underneath 30,000. Today, we're seeing a big bounce. We'll get into that in just a moment. But some of the leaders yesterday, very, very interesting. You look over and you see L brands. I mentioned consumer discretionary. You look and see L brands up about 5%. We talked yesterday a little bit about Peloton, but that actually finished pretty nicely, up about 8% yesterday. We also hit on Splunk, but then you look at Moderna. Moderna up about 6% yesterday. Twitter kicking in with about a 3% move to the upside. And the stay-at-home stocks, that's a little bit surprising based upon what we are seeing right now with the pandemic and where we are in terms of vaccines and the cases and everything else. And yet, Okta, DocuSign, those kind of names really having a pretty amazing move to the upside still, and a very strong move propelling parts of the NASDAQ. But what really moved the NASDAQ, it was the FANG stocks. Let's be real. It's Facebook. It's Apple, it's Microsoft. Matter of fact, Microsoft hitting new highs. Throw in Target, by the way, which also hit new highs. I didn't get a chance to cover that yesterday on the halftime report, probably because Scott didn't want me to, because I talk about it all the time. But who wouldn't want to talk about a stock that a couple of years ago was $60 and now it's in the 235, close to 240 range, and a CEO and a company that has absolutely transformed into a monster behemoth that's taking on the likes of Walmart, taking on the likes of Amazon. Yep, I'll say it, Amazon and others. And what they've been able to accomplish has just been absolutely spectacular. And some of the partnerships and the deals made with CVS, just across the board, some really, really intelligent moves. And that's why that stock's hitting 52-week highs. I saw somebody today with a new price target. It's too low. I think this stock has plenty of room to the upside. When you look at what's on the balance sheet, when you look at the fundamental story, and you look at the PE, it all does still make a lot of sense. At least to me, it does. So a nice move to the upside yesterday. We mentioned NASDAQ, and that was really strong. Today, kind of a quiet start to the day, not necessarily even all that choppy, but we look over at the markets, and not a lot really going on. Matter of fact, the Dow was up maybe 50 or 60 points. We get to the opening, it's only up about 30 points. You look over at the NASDAQ, up about 30 points. NASDAQ's been holding on and building upon that. Last I looked, NASDAQ was up about 50 points or thereabouts. On the other hand, we saw a nice little spike early, at least, a nice move to the upside. And then suddenly we started to see the Dow sort of flicker back and forth between down 30 and maybe up 30. So it'll be interesting. It's only an hour into the day, as I mentioned each and every day, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Yesterday, obviously, a nice big turnaround for the Dow itself. Crude, 73.70. That's impressive, up about 1%. That's certainly one of the reasons why the leadership role is right there with energy. Once again, energy up about 1.5% today. Consumer discretion up about 0.5% today. Financials kind of wavering around. Really, they were positive, but not by much. So we could call them very flat, but a little bit of green. The big name I mentioned a second ago, how about this bounce in Bitcoin that we're seeing? If you go off of the lows yesterday to where we are now, call it 34,000. That's a pretty extreme move to the upside. So again, we talk about volatility. Some of that volatility seemed to have gone away when we were stuck towards that 38 to 40,000 level. We certainly saw a lot of volatility of late as that moved significantly down underneath 30,000. And here we are back again at 34,000. So that's a very, very volatile market that we're looking at there. Speaking of volatility, I mentioned the VIX, but the VIX just seems to want to hover around right now. It came down to 18, came down to 17, and here we are in the mid 16s or thereabouts with the volatility index, which is telling us about a 1% move expected day in and day out from the S&P 500. We'll see if it even can make that type of a move, but that's what we're looking towards right now. That's what the indications give us with the VIX trading right around, as I say, 16. So call it that. Beta Energy, absolutely on fire. Yep, I'm bringing it up again because, as I say, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Take a look at the XOP. Again, moving closer and closer to its highs once again. And what are the names that are really driving it? Here's a long list. Occidental up about 6%, Devon up about 4.5%, Diamondback, which is FANG, up 4%. You got Marathon, you got Halliburton, you got Apache, you got Hess, all up 2.5% or more. So a big, strong move out of energy once again. We've been talking about how much energy has been hitting. If you take a look at the disclosures from yesterday for me, many of the call exposure that I've got, I would say percentage-wise, it definitely leans towards energy. Now, people will say, well, why wasn't energy your pick yesterday when we're talking about sectors? Because quite frankly, when I look at what's been going on with energy, and I go back to last November and it was 36, and now here we are at 73, I think there's still upside. I think these beta names can still move to the upside, but I just wonder if it's going to be a little bit muted based upon how much of a run we've really already had. And so I was looking for other areas that maybe hadn't run as much that might have a little bit more room, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to be trading. I will say this, from a stock perspective, I've got Chevron, I've got KMI. That's it as far as energy. But from an options perspective, just about every one of those names is somewhere in there in terms of calls. Marathon, especially, I've got Marathon Oil, I got Marathon Petroleum. So we've seen option activity across the board in a lot of these different energy names. Take a look at what's been going on with Tesla. Now, this is a name that's gotten lost because we got caught up with all those rebel stocks, GameStop and AMC and BlackBerry and everybody else. But Tesla kind of quietly, it's up about 80 points from the June 3rd lows that we were seeing. And here we are once again today, up quietly again, up about 3.5%, maybe 4% to the upside. So just keep an eye on that name. Not talking about any unusual, not talking about any of that stuff. Just that name did stick out for me. The other name that really sticks out for me is one that I talked about yesterday for unusual, Apple. Now, here's the interesting story behind Apple. When they come for Apple, they come for Apple. It hit 4 separate occasions yesterday with unusual option activity, but that's not the end of it. We've got options hitting again today in Apple. So we've got 5 hits in a day and an hour. So really has been incredible to see. And the stock was trading 132. It's moved towards that 134 level. And will it be able to break out to the upside? A lot of what we were seeing does go out into July. So a little bit of time, not a lot of time. We know where we are as far as the calendar. It's June 23rd today. So going out to July is getting a little bit more time. And so that's something to keep an eye on. So I got two unusuals. We'll get out of here. Hekla. Now, we talk about precious metals all the time. We don't really haven't hit as much recently on silver and gold. We have seen some option paper in there, but it just hasn't been something that I've been really all that excited about. But this one gets me a little bit revved up, and here's why. So Hekla is just one of those names that when it does move, it can move. And we're talking about a stock that was trading at $8.11. They were buying 11,000 of the July 8.5 calls. So it doesn't have to make some extraordinary move. It does have a little bit of time for this to play out. And those calls were going for approximately 30 cents on those 11,000. So that one stuck out for me today. And I think it's something that potentially we could see that start to breach that 8.5 level. Next, Activision. Now, I just got done talking about Okta and Docu and a lot of those stay-at-home stocks. Well, Activision certainly one of those names that people put in that category of a stay-at-home stock as well. A buyer of 15,000 of the November 95 calls with the stock trading right around 91.20. It's a pretty big, that's a large size trade. So I thought that was interesting. Those who are trading also fair amount of premium because you're going out to November. When you're buying that much time in something that's trading at that level and you've got a little implied volatility and you add in the time factor of a November expiring option, these are going for 5.25 up to 560. So not inexpensive, but looking for a move that's going to move that stock up and through that 95 level. And obviously with that kind of premium, they're buying a lot of time. Stock's going to have to probably breach and get up through that 100 level as well, unless it happens quicker than that. And then at that time, maybe it really would start to really move to the upside with time being a part of the value as well. If you don't understand what I'm talking about when I say that, understand the derivatives world, understand the options world. One thing I did miss, 33.5 million contracts yesterday when we talk about volume. So a little bit off of where we've been, but when we're over 30 million, as I mentioned, each and every day, when you're over 30 plus million, that's a big number. That's really, really impressive. And of course, we pushed towards 50 million last week on Friday. We've had a couple of pushes in the 40 millions recently as well. So volumes are there, but you got to understand this derivatives markets, get educated. We got great people here. We've got great people who really understand exactly where you are at the beginning, of the middle, are you at expert level, whatever it might be. But those educators just doing a magnificent job. So I just encourage you to get educated before you jump in the derivatives world, or you may have a poor experience that you're not happy about. Folks, have a great day of trading. We'll see you tomorrow.